For and by you, the people. Live nationwide and streaming live at lesliemarshallshow.com. Call in with your thoughts at 888-6-LESLIE.
Here to set you free. How you doing? I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back. Only true democracy and talk. Thank you for listening to us on radio, on stream, on podcast, watching us on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Twitter's Periscope. Good to have you with us on this Tuesday. A few just personal notes before we get into what's ripped. I've had some people say, I have a fake background. Yes. I do. And the reason that I do is I am in my home, like many of us have to work from home and have been and continue to since the pandemic started over a year ago. And so this room is actually my radio studio, my TV studio, my guest room, and stuff where I pile a bunch of stuff I don't have room for in other rooms. So yes, and I think it's fun to use the different backgrounds. Just like on TV, when you see me, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I like that room behind you in the living room." It is my living room, but it's a screenshot of it. Okay, and that's the world we're living in. So just want to, put that out there. Hope everybody had a wonderful Mother's Day. I got a dozen beautiful red roses sitting here. I don't want to move my camera; it'll get all messed up. My kids and my husband gave me a mini massage and then bought me a Queen's Day at one of the local spas where you get a massage, a manicure, pedicure. They took me out for great coffee, to the ocean because I love the ocean. They took me out for a lovely brunch and for dinner, and they took care of the dog, which I do, even though my kids had promised they would if I got them a dog. I think all of you parents are guardians and caretakers out there, feel my pain and know it well. I promise, Mom, you get me a dog, I'll do all the work. Yeah, right. Anyway, so I hope everyone had a wonderful Mother's Day. And I also want to say, because I've been, I'm someone who buried a child. I'm somebody that had miscarriages and had difficulty having a child. Adopted my son and conceived my daughter after 13, yes, count them, 13 IVF cycles. For 5 years, I was a human pincushion, and by choice. And a lot of people out there, Mother's Day is hard. They're mothers, but their children aren't with them because they have passed on, whether through a miscarriage, stillbirth, or they've died. And of course, there are people out there who want to be moms and who are struggling. So I hope the day was not hard for you, or those of you that have lost your moms. I still have my mom, but I lost my dad. Father's Day is tough for me, so I know that's tough for you. So with that, let's check what is ripped from the headline. Palestinian militants launched dozens of rockets from Gaza, and Israel unleashed new airstrikes against them early today. It's an escalation triggered by soaring tensions in Jerusalem and days of clashes at an iconic mosque in the Holy City. 24 people, including 9 children, were killed in Gaza overnight. I want to say a few things about this. I spent some time in Israel. One could say that I lived there or I was an extended tourist in 1996. And I think many of you know I have a Jewish parent. I'm of Jewish lineage. And I went there, quite frankly, trying to connect with my Jewish side, if you will, with my Judaism. And I saw with my own eyes, and I have to say, and I want to be very clear about this. I was, pretty much brought up that, you just pro-Israel, Jews good, Arabs and Muslims bad. Seriously. And I found that in traveling and in meeting people in this country and throughout the world, that's just not true. I mean, there's good and bad in every religion, good and bad in every culture, good and bad in every nation. And Israel is no exception. When I was there, I saw with my own eyes oppression. The Palestinian people were oppressed. There's a conservative talk show host here in Los Angeles. I don't want to name him. I never agree about anything, but on that we did agree. There are Holocaust survivors that talk about this, building a wall around the Palestinians, like walls were built around some of their parents or their grandparents or them when they were little in the Warsaw Ghetto, as an example, in Poland. And they are oppressed. Now, listen, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas is not going to revoke their charter any day soon. Hamas is not going to recognize the state of Israel or say that the state of Israel has the right to exist anytime soon. I'm not going to bet on any terrorist organization. But at the same time, the Israelis have prohibited travel and placed a ban on Palestinians, have reduced their water supply, their electrical supply, at first did not allow them to be vaccinated against COVID. And when we see in the news that 9 children died in Gaza overnight, you don't hear the outcry from the Christian community or the Jewish community, although there are many Jews that are, I don't want to say pro-Palestinian, but pro-peace. And, people out there who cry about, unborn children or say, they're so pro-life and they care about children. What about those children? What about those 9 children? I shared a tweet from Peter Dow earlier today, which is, we should all take a moment to look at the world through the eyes of a Palestinian child. And having been there and seen it with my own eyes, having been to the Palestinian territories, and by the way, almost 800 people were displaced just this past few months due to the constant resettlements. And what's happening now, by the way, some say may be a violation of international law. Of course, there are critics on both sides of this. But right now, there have been more than 700 Palestinians hurt in clashes with Israeli security forces in Jerusalem and across the West Bank in 24 hours. And I want to say another thing. This, magic negotiation under the Trump administration with his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, that took place. So many people, myself included, predicted this would be the outcome. And there were 500 treated at hospitals. Israeli military said 6 Israeli civilians were hurt by rocket fire this morning. Now, this round of violence, like the previous ones, was fueled by conflicting claims over Jerusalem. Jerusalem is home to major holy sites of all 3, the big 3 religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And I've been there. The Dome of the Rock, right? Jerusalem, everybody wants their take. I really don't think, and I'm sorry, I'm not a spokesperson, but I don't think God would have wanted the fighting, over this constant, over the land. And, is it about Abraham? Is it about Isaac? Is it about Ishmael? And really, if you think about it, Jews and Muslims are half brothers that have been fighting to be daddy's favorite for centuries. That's how it boils down to me. And I'm married to a Muslim. I have a Christian parent and a Jewish parent. So I have a very unique perspective that not all have on that. The rival national and religious narratives of Israelis and Palestinians are rooted in the city, and it makes it the emotional core of a conflict that just doesn't end. Now, in recent weeks, tension has been soaring in Jerusalem, marked by clashes between Palestinian protesters and Israeli police in the walled Old City, located in East Jerusalem, which Israel captured and annexed in that war in 1967. One of the flashpoints in the Old City has been the Al-Aqsa Mosque at that compound. It is the 3rd holiest site of Islam. It is the holiest site of Judaism. Another driver of Palestinian anger has been the threatened eviction of Palestinian families from their homes in an East Jerusalem neighborhood by Israeli settlers. I posted a video showing an exchange of a Muslim woman and her children literally having her home taken over by a Jewish Israeli settler. And you want to know something? This is so unsettling to me. And I'll tell you why. There are a lot of people in Israel who were descendants of Holocaust survivors. Because after the Holocaust, a lot of people wanted to get the heck out of countries like Poland and Germany, and they wanted to come to countries like the United States or the UK. Some felt comfortable going back to some of these countries, but many felt they wanted to go to the homeland, the land of Abraham, a Jewish land, a Jewish state, which they had hoped and prayed for, and they did receive. But when I see images of Jews just taking over Palestinians' homes, don't they know that's what the Nazis did to their relatives? They knocked on the door and said, get out. Now, certainly, Israelis and Jews are not transporting Palestinians to concentration camps. as the Nazis did. So the similarities end there. But I have to say, seriously, this is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. It's what we did to the Native Americans. And it's what's being done. I mean, basically, they keep changing the goalpost in Israel. That's a reality, folks. Look at the maps, right? They're like, you can live here. Oh, we need to build more condos. Get out. We like your house. Get out. It's wrong. Now, this week, we've seen on Monday a long day of anger, deadly violence. There are deep divisions in Jerusalem. Israel tried to celebrate its capture of the city's eastern sector and its sensitive holy sites more than half a century ago. Dozens of rockets flying into Israel continued throughout the night. By the way, Palestinians were dying over their holy holiday, Ramadan. We'll take a break. We'll be back.
I want to get back to seeing my grandbabies every Sunday and smothering them with big hugs and kisses.
I want to get back to football games with my boys.
I want to get back to feeling and touching, connecting with the people around me.
I want to get back to family dinners and my grandma's mac and cheese.
I want to get back to real grocery shopping, taking my time, walking down every aisle, smelling the tomatoes and melons, having a free sample or two, or 3.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. But now, there are vaccines. And they are the first step that let us get back to feeling optimistic about the days ahead of us. It's okay to have questions.
Is it safe?
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Now, get the facts. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hey sis, missed you this morning. Kim told me you weren't feeling well, so I'm just doing a self-care check.
Oh, thank you, friend.
How you doing?
Girl, listen, my energy was so low because I didn't eat breakfast when I got up, so I had to miss virtual yoga with y'all.
Trust me, I understand.
But I'm doing much better now that I've eaten, so I'm back on track.
Great. In that case, let's get some steps in tonight. I'll come over and we can walk around the lake.
Sounds good. Appreciate you being in my business, too. Now, let me get in yours. Did you check your blood pressure today?
I did that and my squats, okay?
Okay.
High blood pressure is not going to be my friend if I can help it. See you at 6?
Let's get it. See you then.
Now more than ever, it's important that we protect our hearts and the hearts of those we love. Check in on one another and be a part of a healthy blood pressure movement. Rally your squad to take the online pledge at releasethepressure.org. Brought to you by the Release the Pressure Coalition and the Ad Council.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1967. That was the day United Farm Workers Sons of Zapata joined with the Confederation of Mexican Workers in establishing an international picket line across the Rio Grande Valley. A push to organize farm workers at 6 major growers began the year before, in the spring of 1966. Wages in Starr County ranged from 40 to 85 cents an hour. Farm workers began their strike in June of 1966 for wage increases and union recognition. But growers would rather see their crops rot than recognize the union. They did grant wage increases, but immediately ran to the courts for injunctions. One district judge outlawed all picketing, while police instructed county workers to spray the strikers with insecticide. That August, workers voted to organize with the United Farm Workers and began a pilgrimage march to the state capitol to popularize their cause. 15,000 workers and their supporters reached Austin on Labor Day to demand their right to organize. They returned to Starr County to continue their strike. The growers turned to Mexican commuters holding green cards to break the strike. The United Farm Workers began picketing at Roma and Rio Grande City bridges and were often successful in turning back green card workers. By May 1967, melon harvest had begun. After months of negotiations, picket lines went up on both sides of the international bridges. The picketing was 100% successful for 2 days, but the Mexican government and Starr County Sheriff's Department soon intervened to break up the picket lines. Texas Rangers were brought in to arrest and brutalize strikers. The strike was broken, but organizing continued throughout the region. Picketing across borders was itself an important act of international solidarity. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
We are back. I'm Leslie Marshall. We'll continue with what is ripped from those headlines. The Food and Drug Administration authorized the emergency use of Pfizer BioNTech coronavirus vaccine for 12 to 15-year-old adolescents. This was announced yesterday. I have two 13-year-olds. They're both going to be getting their vaccine on May 17th. The emergency authorization marks a critical milestone in the push to get more Americans vaccinated and fully reopen schools for in-person learning this fall. 2 weeks after they get their vaccine, they're fully vaccinated, they will no longer have to wear masks at school. Pfizer has said its vaccine was 100% effective at protecting, did you hear that? 100% effective at protecting against COVID-19 in a trial of more than 2,200 children between the ages of 12 and 15. And I was reading more about those clinical trials because my husband and I were doing research to determine if we were going to say yay or nay to our kids getting vaccinated. And the kids got some kids got nauseous or threw up, some got a fever, some their arm hurt, some got a headache, some felt fatigued, just like the adults. By the way, in medicine, 12 and over is considered adult in studies, just to let you know biologically. And that's how come younger kids could go back to school sooner than those in junior high and high school. And what they're saying, well, FDA Commissioner Janet Woodcock said, quote, today's action allows for a younger population to be protected from COVID-19, bringing us closer to returning to a sense of normalcy and to ending the pandemic. Parents and guardians can rest assured that the agency undertook a rigorous and thorough review of all the available data. And something my husband and I found, he is a physician, I am not, but in our research was that this, one of the things that was happening is that some of the kids were getting that respiratory problem. We saw over 100 children, 157, I believe, in New York, and some other places in the world, in this country. And they found that because the vaccine is 100% effective against COVID-19, it also seems to block that transition to that other respiratory virus and respiratory viral problem that kids were getting. And also because it's 100% effective at COVID, they feel it'll be stronger against some of these variants, which you heard Dr. Bob Bollinger say from Johns Hopkins the other day on the program. Might be stronger and might be more deadly. We are seeing the Brazilian and Indian strains stronger, and the Brazilian strain has just hit our shores in the state of Florida. So children are at low risk for serious illness from COVID-19, but experts say allowing the virus to circulate among unvaccinated kids could lead to new, more dangerous variants, as I just mentioned, and slow down the protection of adults. So in other words, we're vaccinating the kids to keep them safe, but also to keep us safe. So still about 1.5 million, and grandma, right? Still about 1.5 million COVID-19 cases in individuals 11 to 17 years of age have been reported to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention since the beginning of the pandemic. The FDA already authorized Pfizer's vaccine for people 16 and older. Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, they have trials for teens underway. Parents' enthusiasm for the incoming emergency use authorization has been mixed, though, even among those who themselves have been vaccinated. I know that some of my son's best friends' moms who I'm friends with or friendly with are saying no to the vaccine. Some that I was very surprised. Only 52% of parents of children under 18 say they're likely to vaccinate their kids as soon as they're eligible. That's according to an AXIOS Ipsos survey from last month of April. In a separate survey from KFF, that's the Kaiser Foundation, 32% of parents said they'll wait to see how the vaccine works before getting their child vaccinated. 19% said they definitely wouldn't get their child vaccinated. What's next? Well, the CDC Advisory Committee will meet tomorrow to review the data, make recommendations for the vaccine's use in that age group, 12 to 15 years of age. Moderna, they're expected to announce trial results for adolescents aged 12 to 17 in the second half of this year, according to the report by the New York Times. Let's rip another. President Joe Biden is plunging into the next phase of his administration with the steady approval of a majority of Americans. That's according to a new poll from the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research. And the survey shows that President Biden is buoyed in particular by the public's broad backing for his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. In the fourth month of his presidency, his overall approval rating sits at 63%. When it comes to the new Democratic president's handling of the pandemic, 71% of Americans approve. 47 Republicans, almost half of Republicans. That AP-NORC poll also shows an uptick in Americans' overall optimism about the state of the country. 54% say the country is on the right track, higher than at any point in the polls conducted since 2017. 44% think the nation is not on the right track. Those positive marks have fueled the Biden White House's confidence coming out of the president's first 100 days in office, a stretch in which he secured passage of a sweeping $1.9 trillion pandemic relief package and surged COVID-19 vaccines across this nation. Now, the U.S. has suffered the most virus deaths of any nation in the world. It is now viewed enviable by much of the rest of the world because we have a speedy vaccination program and a robust supply of shots. Jeff Zients, the White House COVID-19 response coordinator, Zients, my apologies, I'm saying it wrong. We are turning a corner, he said. And the improvements have also impacted Americans' concerns about the virus. The AP-NORC poll shows the public's worries about the pandemic, lowest level since February of 2020, when the virus was first reaching us here in the United States. About half of Americans say they're at least somewhat worried that they or a relative could be infected with the virus, but that's down about 7 in 10 from just a month earlier. And as has been the case throughout the pandemic, there is a wide partisan gap. American Democrats, 69%, remain at least somewhat worried about being infected, compared with just 33% of Republicans. Now, despite the overall positive assessments of Americans, Biden's advisors are well aware that the next phase of his presidency, well, it's going to be trickier. Vaccination rates will slow. And the administration's grappling to persuade those who are reluctant to get the shots about their safety and efficacy. By the way, we are down to, I saw reports today, at approximately 11%. That's very low compared to a third or more of the population. So I think those are some good signs and good numbers. Let's rip another. Another good sign, the Biden administration will be reinstating anti-discrimination protections for the LGBTQ community, and especially transgender people. Those have been narrowed under the Trump administration. And this is according to Health and Human Services Secretary, my former Attorney General here in the state of California, Xavier Becerra. Now, why does it matter? A Trump-era rule that excluded gender identity from sex discrimination protections made it easier for doctors, hospitals, and insurance companies to deny transgender people health coverage. Now, that rollback came this past summer in June, and in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was part of a broader effort by the Trump administration to narrow legal protections for the LGBTQ community. The new protections will bring the agency's policies in line with the Supreme Court ruling last year. That ruling prevents employers from firing employees based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. What they're saying, quote, it simply says what everyone already should know. You should not discriminate against people. That includes those based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And when it comes to health care, we want to make sure that that's the case. There was a provision in the Affordable Care Act which said that. And so now it's clear. There's no ambiguity. You cannot discriminate against people based on sexual orientation or gender identity. So the big picture here, LGBTQ advocates viewed the confirmation of Becerra as a win for transgender rights, considering his track record in California as Attorney General and what he's doing now as head of HHS. I'm Leslie Marshall. That's what's ripped from the headlines. Our guests coming up and more. Don't go away. We'll be back in a moment.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I gotta tell you, I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too, but I'm glad we are.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and life experiences come together through conversation, and it feels good.
Wow, your story is so...
interesting?
Yeah.
When people actually sit down, talk, and listen to one another, they can break down boundaries and connect as human beings. At lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep, you can listen to amazing, life-changing conversations and find simple tools to start a conversation of your own.
I know one thing. This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot of hope, too.
Take a step toward bringing our country and your community together by having the courage to start a conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
Is corporate ethics an oxymoron? Do you have to be a jerk to be a successful CEO? Is exploitation the only path to profit? The good news is that many companies, big and small, in the food economy are blazing a different path through Wall Street's jungle of greed, demonstrating that money and morality can be compatible. Texas supermarket chain H-E-B, for example, has drawn an intense loyal customer base by 1. Investing in good wages and benefits for employees, 2. Showing up in such emergencies as pandemics, hurricanes, freezes to give essential supplies and hands-on help, and 3. Being an involved and supportive neighbor to the hundreds of unique communities it serves. Also, Maine Grains is relocalizing the business of milling grain by working with local farmers who had been abandoned by global grain marketers. They're producing flours from heritage grains, boosting the local economy in the process. Then there's Bob's Red Mill, which also mills its products from diverse natural grains, and it's 100% employee-owned. These are part of a rising business alternative to the selfish profiteering ethic of Fortune 500 titans. Called certified B corporations, they definitely exist to make a profit, but they're equally focused on having a positive social impact, prioritizing fair wages, environmental protections, and healthy communities as core elements of their missions, even making those goals legal requirements of their corporate charter. This is Jim Hightower saying Ben & Jerry's and New Belgium Brewery are just a couple more of some 3,800 other businesses now organized as B Corps. Though not pretending to be perfect, they're at least striving to be more than money grubbers, instead trying to contribute to the common good. For more information, go to bcorporation.net.
If you miss Leslie on TV this week, catch up at lesliemarshallshow.com.
We are back. So is he. I'm Leslie Marshall. He is Atiba Madyun. Atiba is the president and CEO of the Madyun Group, a government relations firm based in our nation's capital, as well as Party Politics US. They're a data collection firm that not only gathers data from American voters, but also engages with young people to educate them on public policy. He's the former division director of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, as well as the author of the novel Saving Grace. That's available for purchase on Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. His website is atibamadyun.com. That's ATIBAMADYUN.com. On Twitter at Atiba Madyun. ATIBAMADYUN. Last on our show in February, did a great job, so we're very excited to have him back. Thank you for joining us, Atiba. Welcome and welcome back. Good to have you with us today.
Thanks, Leslie. It's great to be back with you.
Atiba, it seems that we can have some support on both sides of the aisle, right? There are key issues like infrastructure, where both sides agree. Sometimes we can get some agreement with regard to COVID or vaccines, but a key issue right now, when you look at polls and a concern of voters, and not just among Democrats, is policing. They do feel there's too much violence, and the majority of Americans that have been polled show that they favor reformation of police and police departments in some capacity. So there's a bipartisan group of lawmakers working on legislative efforts to overhaul policing. They appear to be nearing an agreement to set federal standards for no-knock warrants, ban chokeholds, except in life-threatening situations, and place limits on equipment the Defense Department can send to state and local police departments. So talk to us about this. Is this what Democrats meant when they said defund the police? Is it reformation? Is it restructuring? And is it reallocation of funds in areas where police may not have expertise, such as dealing with those who are mentally ill?
Well, I think that was a lot, that you just mentioned, Leslie. And in terms of what Democrats, particularly progressives, have been talking about and what they are looking for regarding police reform and defunding the police is really about how you reallocate some of these resources, how you take some of the pressures off of police officers, because apparently they can't handle the pressures that they have from a mental standpoint. In terms of, if you think about all the things that police officers do in terms of policing, they pull people over for traffic stops. They're called in for to do what maybe a mental evaluator could do. We've seen far too many people die because of something that could have probably been handled by social services as opposed to the police. One of the sticking points has been qualified immunity, which for me is a really sticking point, because with qualified immunity, often police officers are getting away with murder, literally, and then their departments can't be sued because the officer has what they call immunity. It's almost like 007, you have a license to kill per se, because that's what we keep seeing with police departments and police officers around the country. One of the things that has been offered is, with the qualified immunity, is negotiate where they can where a victim or a victim's family can sue police departments. This is something that is a little bit different, because technically what generally has happened when you hear about civil suits is that the victims' families are suing the city. Here's a sticking point about that. When you're suing the city, let's just say, for instance, if it was a majority Black city, then the taxpayers are the ones who are ending up footing that bill. Personally, I would like it to so that, and I don't know if I think this is going to happen in this bill, but I think one of the things that we should be talking about is how can, when these things happen and there's a civil suit, can the victims sue the police departments that then have to pay money out of those police, it's not a trust, out of the retirement fund. Because when you start seeing those monies come directly from out of police officers' pockets, you'll start seeing a different thing in terms of behavior. But in terms of, you asked, the question was, is this what progressives have been looking for? It's not all that they are looking for, but it's a step in a different direction than we've been seeing.
In the right direction, right?
I think it's the right direction.
Do you think we have more bipartisan support because people actually saw what people, not just people of color, but what people throughout the nation have been saying, which is there is excessive force being used, even more so and disproportionately to African-American males? And Tim Scott, a Republican from South Carolina, along with Senator Cory Booker, a Democrat from New Jersey, and Congresswoman Karen Bass, Democrat from my state here in California, they're leading the charge to craft this bipartisan piece of legislation. And even though Tim Scott has said that, Senator Scott has said that, we don't have systemic racism, he fully admitted that, he was stopped numerous times, as a Black man in America. So my question is, one, do we have some, like Tim Scott and others on the right, coming to the table because they saw this with their own eyes, and they also saw the reaction of this, not just country, but the world, having seen this video, which is very, very, very difficult to watch?
Yeah, it's difficult to watch, but here's another video, January 6th.
Yes.
We saw, this insurrection happen on Capitol Hill, where people entered the Capitol with weapons, where we heard about pipe bombs that were placed around my city, Washington, D.C. And you saw a totally different response in terms of the police as related to that mob. And, here's a part that keeps sticking in my mind. Of course, we remember the 9 minutes plus of an officer's knee on his neck of George Floyd. But we also saw a woman try to enter the Speaker of the House chambers, and we saw her get shot because police officers were clearly threatened in that situation. We saw police officers die in the or who were killed in that insurrection, but we didn't see the same type of response toward those mostly white
correct
people, Americans, than we do toward Black Americans in far less volatile situations.
Oh, no, absolutely. There were, I obviously are looking at me. I'm a white chick. I was going out of my mind because there was one Capitol Police officer who was helping this woman, this white woman, down the stairs. She was recording it on her selfie. And I tweeted, what does he think this is, the prom? And this is his prom date? The other thing is, people are walking out. The guy who had his feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk. People who put up a noose. People who took the American flag and used the pole to beat police officers were not being apprehended on site. And then when you just compare and contrast that with the photos of, which you would think was war in a third world nation, and how they protected the Capitol when, there were going to be Black Lives Matter protest, and, you've got riot gear, you've got people lined up ready for war. And honestly, it's made the FBI's job harder. You see FBI Washington office and other offices, but mostly the Washington, D.C. office and, the general FBI bureau, posting even today. We still have not been able to get this guy. Pipe bomb, you mentioned. The guy that they saw with the pipe bomb. I think it's a guy, might be a woman, but that person has not been arrested as of yet. Although over 400 people have been arrested, there are so many still at large, and it would have made federal law enforcement's job easier had they been arrested, because had they been prepared. And there are even questions I'm sure you saw today about, okay, you have all these Proud Boys and you have this going on January 6th. Yet you were sent over there. Why were you sent over there for that disturbance, which was this big?
Right.
When you have a problem or a potential problem brewing with the Proud Boys and others on January 6th.
Exactly. So when we're talking now about police reform, I think across the board, people like me, what we're saying is, if you're going to reform the police departments, let's reform them in a way that it works for everyone. I remember, and I often, when I'm talking about this particular issue, remember when police officers were in my school as a child in Washington, D.C., and we called them officer friendly. These were the police officers that were getting to know the children as we were growing older. So when we saw the police officer in the community, there was a relationship. Now what we feel in the African-American community is that there's not an officer friendly, there's an officer enemy. There's an officer who automatically is looking at me as being the enemy, and then I'm looking at him, and if I try to speak, he's not speaking back. If he's behind me and I'm driving my car, I'm watching to see, is he running my tag? There's all these different parts of this. So not all of this is going to be addressed in policy, but in terms of whether or not it goes into training, whether it goes in terms of penalties and punishments that come along with this, this is what I'm looking for to see what's going to be in this police reform bill to change the way that policing is happening.
Do you think they'll pass the 60 vote threshold? We have 30 seconds, so quick yes or no.
No.
Oh,
I don't.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You and I are bonding on the pessimism side here. Sadly, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with our guest and with you right after this. Don't go away. More to talk about.
Follow Leslie on Twitter. Just go to www.twitter.com/Leslie Marshall, and we'll be sure to share your tweets.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
Yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. We show up differently, worship differently, and have found new ways to express our love and support to family and friends. But now there are vaccines, and they are the first step that lets us get back into the things we miss most, like spreading the word without spreading concern, girls tripping instead of solo sipping, brunching instead of late night munching, and talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. It's okay to have questions about COVID-19 vaccines.
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Is it safe?
Can I trust it?
What about pre-existing conditions?
Now get the facts. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when COVID-19 vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome to Code WAC, your podcast about America's broken healthcare system and how Medicare for All could help. I'm your host, Brenda Gazar. Why are physicians in private practice struggling today? What can be done to help make doctors' lives easier so they can better help patients? To find out, we spoke to Dr. Nancy Naparco, a pediatric neurologist who once was in private practice and now works for Children's Hospital, Los Angeles, doing outpatient clinics. Welcome to Code WAC, Dr. Naparco. You used to be in private practice. Tell us why you made the switch.
In private practice, medical insurance companies are essentially putting private practice out of business. That's the way I sum it up. The reimbursements for what is called cognitive medicine has gone down over the last 30 years so that they actually pay less for a 1-hour doctor visit compared to almost 30 years ago. Cognitive means we don't do surgery. So your pediatrician, your internal medicine doctor, your psychiatrist, they sit and they talk to the patient, they examine the patient, they explain diseases. So a psychiatrist kind of got it right early on. They started charging for time. But the rest of us, even though most of what we do is talking with the patient or physically examining a patient without tricks, those reimbursements have actually gone down so that it's really impossible to maintain a private practice unless you regularly spend 3 or 5 minutes with a patient.
Get the full Code WAC story on progressivevoices.com and on the PV app. Catch all our episodes by subscribing to Code WAC wherever you find your podcasts. This podcast is powered by Heal California, a nonprofit that uplifts the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. Until next time, stay healthy.
If you miss Leslie on TV this week, catch up at lesliemarshallshow.com.
And we're back. Hey there. Happy Tuesday. I'm Leslie Marshall. Our guest is Atiba Madyun. Atiba is president and CEO of the Madyun Group, a government relations firm based in D.C. He's also as well as Party Politics U.S. They're a data collection firm that not only gathers data from American voters, but also engages with young people to educate them on public policy. Follow him on Twitter at Atiba Madyun, ATIBA-MADYUN, and the website Atiba Madyun, ATIBA-MADYUN.com. Glad to have him back. Thank you for holding, Atiba, and welcome back. Let's talk about some of the areas that, you said this is a start. What are the priorities with this legislation, and what are some things that the legislation being proposed doesn't address?
I'm laughing because the priority is to stop killing Black people. I mean, that it's just that simple. It's that simple. Stop killing us. You think about Breonna Taylor, she was sitting in her home. The no-knock warrant that's in this bill is very important. I mean, we can't sit in our homes anymore and feel safe without a police officer coming in. I can't remember.
We have a constitutional amendment, right? We have the right to be protected from illegal search and seizure.
I mean, I remember there's a young man, I don't remember his name, so please forgive me on that, in Texas, who was sitting in his own home when a police officer entered his home thinking that it was her home and shot and killed him because she thought she was in her house because she was drunk.
Right.
what do we want? We want to be treated like human beings. I often hear the term over the 20 plus years I've been working on public policy that you can't legislate behavior. So we can change the laws. We can create more penalties per se to govern how police officers or police departments are run. But the culture also has to be changed. And the culture within this country is one that's really began, Bonhomme, John, thanks, Mark. It was, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought because
I do it all the time.
Picturing him sitting in his home eating ice cream and being killed in his home. But just, when I think about police officers today, I cannot help but think back to slavery. I can't help but think back to my great-great-grandparents and what they struggled to do in order to acquire land, and that there were these slave patrols. And these slave patrols are what, told people you can't move around as a slave without your slave papers. Today, it's let me see your ID. Are you going to, what is the term that they use in terms of comply? No matter what we do, we still ended up getting killed. So is policy going to change that? We hope so. That's the hope. But you've got to figure out, I think, how we change the culture and how there's going to be more discipline that's coming from the top down and how other officers are going to police themselves.
But and it's not just police. We're talking about this legislation, but there is systemic racism. There is white privilege. I say that again as a white woman. How do we address systemic racism, not just within the police department, but within our nation, especially among some individuals that don't believe that is an issue, including Senator Scott?
Yeah, Senator Scott's in denial. I mean, when he made the statement the other day, and I know there are a lot of other people who will disagree. America is a racist country. It's built on racism. Capitalism is built on slavery. So you can't ignore that. It's like alcoholism. You cannot address a problem if you don't first accept the fact that you have one. And so we do have a problem. When we talk about systemic racism, it's not just within the police departments. It's in the hospitals. I mean, there was a woman who went to a hospital who was a doctor during this pandemic who knew the symptoms of what she had in terms of with COVID. She went to the hospital. She tried to talk to the doctors. They sent her home and she died. That's systemic racism. People talk about, oh, well, Black people are lazy. Well, you keep trying to fight your way through something economically, and every time you get somewhere, the door is closed to you. You go to try and get a mortgage, you try and go get a job, and those things continue to be closed to you. Eventually, you're going to look at the system and recognize that not only is it bent the opposite way of you, but it's not bent towards you being able to move about freely. So the systemic racism we hear about, I think we've got to do, I don't want to say a better job in terms of talking about it. We've got to do a better job in terms of how we're listening to one another, because the country now is divided. It's not divided because all of a sudden overnight we just decided to be divided. It's divided because this has been going on for a long time and we've been pitted against one another for a long time.
Yeah, I would agree. Hundreds of years, right? And some of the old sentiments that broke our country apart, in the Civil War in North and South, absolutely. Going back to the legislation and going back to qualified immunity, Senator Scott proposed shifting the responsibility to police departments as opposed to individual officers. Democrats with this legislation said both the officers and departments should be held accountable. I would imagine you agree with the latter. Am I correct? And if you could just touch upon that.
I think you've got to hold both accountable. And I think you have to hold the officers who are present when these things happen accountable too, because that's how you change the culture. If you just say, okay, well, the police department is accountable, it still absolves the police officer of any wrongdoing. So there's got to be more onus or responsibility that's put on the officers, as well as those officers who keep turning their backs and allowing these things to continue to happen.
Also, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, I'm wondering if this feeds into your pessimism. I know it does mine. It passed the House with 0 Republican support last month. And in that bill, it calls for language to be changed so police officers can be charged for reckless conduct as opposed to the current willful misconduct. And that change would lower the standard for prosecuting police officers. That, Senator Scott says, is an issue that's a red line for him. At least he's coming to the table and trying to work on this with Democrats, not so much for the rest of his party. Does that lead into your decision to say it won't reach the 60 vote threshold?
What gears my decision is that we're seeing a Republican Party that continues to project things back as if it's not racist. So we've seen voter suppression laws that are going on around the country. We see an insecure white American male base that is pushing this thing. And so do I think that they're going to let go of the idea that the police, who they feel protect them, and their so-called way of life is going to then all of a sudden turn around and give 10 votes to the Democrats? No, I don't.
You touched upon this, and I believe this, that there is a fear among whites, especially white men, that they will no longer be in the majority, whether it's 2050 or 2054, depending. We had every group of people in this country had a reduction in birth rates this past year due to COVID. We'll see if we'll make up for that when we start getting vaccinated more and visiting and hugging leads to more than hugging. But do you think that plays into it? The white man fear of not being in the majority and fearful that, a person of color will be, because certainly if you just look at birth rates, Hispanics are winning that race right now.
Take away the white male construct in terms of money, then you lose power, you lose money, you lose power, you lose your women. So there's a whole lot of things that are like at bay here that these men are fearful of. But it's a lot deeper than that. The issues are in their tissues. If you go back to slavery, you look at the power structure that white men had, and then you look at how things continue to have been within a construct to continue to maintain some level of superiority. This whole idea of white superiority is based on an idea, in my belief, of their knowing of idea of inferiority, having studied us for so long, that put us on a level playing field, we have a different story. So in order to feel superior, you have to keep pulling people down. And that's what we keep seeing, or pushing people down. That's what we keep seeing within this. And that's what we keep seeing within this legislation, that there's a desire to make sure that to keep people down in order to keep them elevated without having to work hard the way that they tell everyone else that they have to.
We only have less than a couple minutes left. So I want to talk about this wave of GIP anti-protest bills that will criminalize, protesters. In Florida, we have seen that anti-riot bills, right? Florida last month with Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who loves Donald Trump and wants to run for president, obviously. And it's not just we have like a minute, so I'm going to shut up. Can you speak to this and maybe if you have time to touch on the voting?
Elections have consequences. So what we have to do is we keep seeing these things that happen. We see the Republicans in a power position within these states. We have to go out and vote in numbers that are too large for them to manipulate. Everything that they're trying to do, we can win. We saw what happened in 2018. We saw what happened in 2020. We got to keep our eyes on the prize and do the same things in New Jersey and Virginia this year. And then we've got to gear up and whatever laws and whatever that they're putting in place, be ready to circumvent them and win again in 2022 and get them out of office.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we need people to bring their own water and food because Republicans don't want you to have that.
To them 151 feet away from the polling place and not within the 150 feet that they changed. We can go around it. We've done
150 feet and a 1/16 of an inch just to be a pain in the ass, right? Atiba, always good to have you with us. Atiba Madyun was on our show before. We had him back, and we will have him back again. Go to his website, atibamadyon.com, ATIBAMADYUN.com. On Twitter, you follow him there at ATIBAMADYUN, same spelling. And check out his book, Saving Grace, available for purchase on Amazon in paperback and on Kindle. Thank you, Atiba. And Mark Grimaldi, our wonderful executive producer. We wouldn't have this show, anything without you. Have a great day, and we'll be back with you soon here on The Only True Democracy.